Crazy hair. What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Son of a Tech once again, and welcome back to the channel. Today, as promised, we have a review of the first Bitcoin ASIC miner I have ever owned, and that is going to be the Coinminer C16 Pro. Now, they have various models. We'll cover an overview of all of the models in this video as well, and then we will be talking about the miner specifically, some of the issues I ran into, some of the good things about the miner, price point, etc. And of course, this is coming thanks to a sponsorship from bt-miners.com. We have fully vetted them and placed multiple orders with them. So if you're looking for a place to purchase ASIC miners in the United States, check out bt-miners.com. They have a warehouse in the New York area that will help with also resolving any issues that you do have. So a stateside, basically, facility that will help facilitate in servicing you. Now, that being said, be sure to check out the links for them in the description below and use my affiliate code when ordering for free shipping. Definitely helps the channel out. Huge shout out to BT Miners, and I'm happy to do this review. We'll get into it right after a word from them right now. Today's sponsor is BT Miners. Purchasing mining equipment online can be dangerous. With all of the fake storefronts and scams, it can be hard to find a reliable source. That's why when BT Miners reached out for a channel sponsorship, I started by verifying that ordering and delivery went smoothly with a purchase of my own. If you are looking to purchase ASICs hardware from Bitcoin to Dogecoin miners, they are available for purchase on bt-miners.com. BT Miners is a trusted source by both ASICminervalue.com and cryptominer.com. Follow the affiliate link in the description and use promo code FREESHIPPING2021 for free shipping on your order. Welcome back. So first things first, as always, I like to hop into the specifications. We're going to talk about the Coinminer, basically what other options they have out there, and then we'll talk about this model, the Pro model specifically, and get it going. So first things first, we have the C16 series, and here are the available designs. You have a C16 Max, which is the high-end model at 113 terahash a second with 3,400 watts of power consumption. The power efficiency is 30 joules per terahash. You are on the FinFET N+1 process technology. There are 4 boards in this model on the C16 Max, and then your network connection is Ethernet, and the temperature is between 0 and 40 degrees Celsius, which we'll be talking about here when we review the C16 Pro, which is going to be the step-down model at 98 terahash a second with 3,400 watts. It says 34 joules per terahash. And then once again, same process technology, same amount of boards, same network connection, and same temperature. The C16S, which is a step down from that, is 92 terahash a second at the same power consumption, which will result in the 37 joules per terahash. And that is only going to have 3 boards in them. It's important to actually note that in the case of these miners, because the boards are so packed together, less boards in one miner could potentially mean better cooling solution for you, depending on your particular setup and the amount of square footage you have available. Stepping down from there, you have the C16M, and that's going to be 82 terahash a second, resulting in 41 joules per terahash. And then finally, the C16E, which is 76 terahash a second, at the same power consumption, resulting in 44 joules per terahash. So that's the complete lineup of the C16 miners, and as I stated, I purchased them from BT Miners here. Right now, you can purchase the Coinminer C16 basically Pro, or you can get the S or the M. Right now, the E model and the Max model are not available through BT Miners. Pricing on these is going to be $8,200 for the 98 terahash model. You're going to have $7,500 for the 92 terahash model, and you will have $67.99 for the 83 terahash model, keeping in mind the S and the M, as stated over here, would have 3 boards in them instead of 4. I think the sweet spot there would probably be the S, because you get the most terahash out of those 3 boards as far as the performance goes. Now, for me in particular, I don't have a way to measure power draw from the wall at this point. So unfortunately, that's something I can't do in this review that I really want to do. If you guys have any ideas or access to potential tools that would allow me to better measure this power from the wall, please let me know. That's my number one concern at this point, because I feel like I didn't get that in the review. The reason why these miners are interesting is because they're coming in at a much lower price point than the traditional Bitmain options, and allows you to get into mining Bitcoin at a lower cost, which is initial cost, which is going to be important. Now, if we're looking at pure performance numbers, then you may want to check out the Bitmain options and the S19s. If you are looking for those, BT Miners does have you covered there as well, so check that out. All right, so if we take a look at the unit itself, you are going to be pretty familiar with it. It looks like pretty much any other ASIC miner. It's built a little bit more compact than, say, an S19, and that does mean, of course, the hash boards are quite close together, and we'll talk about why that matters, of course, here in a second when we get to thermals. So at the top of the unit, you'll have your LAN port. You'll basically plug that LAN port into your switch or your router, and then that's how you will get the internet connectivity. There is not going to be a wireless option on this particular model, or really any ASICs. Also, I wouldn't recommend doing it because you can hurt, of course, the stale shares, the amount of stale shares that you have on the mining pool. So for this particular one, we have basically plugged it in, and then we got to work checking out all of the settings. And the settings menu is pretty basic. It's going to look exactly like your S19s and so on. Right now, there's no custom firmware, so overclocking is out of the question as of right now, because basically there'll need to be some sort of custom firmware for that. And the settings are very basic. When you get logged in, you're going to basically see a miner configuration setup where you can set your pool worker, and then of course your pool password and all of that with backups. You have 3 pools for backups, so if one fails, it can fail over to another. And this is pretty standard across all of it. It will suggest a pool difficulty, but if you want the pool to decide that, you can uncheck that for that option. Other settings include diagnostics for your network, which can be super beneficial here, because if you want to basically ping a specific pool to see where your best ping is to reduce your stale shares, you can utilize this tool to do so. Remembering that the lower the ping, the lower the least amount of milliseconds, shortest amount of time to the pool, is going to reduce the stale shares more and more. Other options, you have a factory reset. Be careful with this button. It'll completely reset everything on the machine. I did have to use that. We'll talk about why here in a second. You also have your firmware flash, but of course right now all you can really flash it to is the primary or the official firmware. So no overclocking settings like I said before. If we do get options for that, of course I'll cover it on this channel in a separate guide. You have your network interfaces if you want to set a static IP, and in a lot of cases in a mining farm, static IPs can be super beneficial, because if you've labeled the miner, etc., with its IP, it's easier to locate the down miners and so on. So it's good that option is there. Now, the authentication method is going to basically just be a username and password. So, it is internal network. You shouldn't have any issues unless somebody gets into your internal network, and just make sure you reset the password, which you can do in this system through the system option. Now, under status and overview is where you're going to get all the information, including your host name that is currently under, the model, which all of them at this point I think are going to be labeled C16. You're going to have your firmware version listed, your local time, your uptime, your load average, and then of course more information on your miner, which is going to cover your gigahash per second average and your gigahash per second over the last 5 minutes. And it'll show you a list of your shares, whether it's your accepted shares versus rejected shares and discarded. Keeping in mind that the discarded shares, you can either have that done on the miner side where it will abandon them, or you can have that done on the pool side and it'll just tell, of course, the miner to abandon those shares. I don't know exactly which setting is best here. If you guys have any insight, let me know in the comment section below. You also have your network settings. It'll tell you what the IP is, the MAC address, etc. So definitely check that out. And then you have your option for rebooting the server under a separate menu in case you just need to bounce it for whatever reason. You have a section for just restarting the mining, which is going to be important as well in case you made any configuration changes that don't appear to be sticking. And then you have your system log, which is where you're going to head on over to if you're having any instability within the system or if it stopped mining. Now, in my particular case, what I've set up is just using pool-in, and the good thing about pool-in is it will alert you via either, your email or phone number if mining stops on the system. And as far as that goes, we have had one time where the system went ahead and stopped mining. And I got an alert from pool-in and I went over to the farm to check it out. And I had some weird kind of results here with this. So trying to go back in the log, I didn't actually find anything where it significantly overheated, but remember that temperature range, 0 to 40 degrees Celsius. It appears that in this particular case, if you are above 40 degrees Celsius, the mining will stop. And then until it cools down below 40 degrees Celsius, it will not restart. This was a particularly hot day in the area, and essentially I had to try to restart it, but unfortunately it seemed to keep getting stuck. And even when it dropped below 40°C, it wouldn't resume the mining. To resolve this, what I did was essentially flash that firmware, do a full reset and redo all of my settings, and then it came back online. Now, as you can see in these screenshots, for over 5 days, we haven't had any issues with this miner in particular. And now at this point of recording this video, it's been well over a week without any particular issues. And the temperature did rise back up here in my local area, so I think we're okay. Let's talk about the cooling solution though. And because these hash boards are so close together, there is the threat of course, overheating, which you need to pay attention to. That means you're going to need to be able to get that heat dissipated out of whatever area you are mining in. And you are going to want to make sure that you have some sort of airflow additional headed towards these miners, in my humble opinion, at this point, to make sure that you don't deal with any of these overheating issues like we've seen. The note about that, of course, is going to be that essentially we haven't had any issues again once we got some direct air cooling on it, and we don't have full ventilation at my farm yet, meaning we aren't sucking that hot air out. I have it on the lowest shelf to make sure that we are sucking in the coolest air from the bottom, and hopefully we will be good to go. That's the only snafu that I really ran into with this miner, other than the fan grills in shipment being damaged and pushing against the fan to where the fans wouldn't spin. To resolve this, of course, I removed the fan grills, put the screws back in, and there is no protection there. So, don't let any toddlers run around and stick their fingers in the fans, because these are high-speed server grade 140 millimeter fans, which are larger than most miners, and they spin very quickly, and they have to because they need to keep these hash boards cool when they're so close together. Talking about power here, what we do have is essentially a different setup than what you would see with an S19 using around the same power. And that's because the S19s are going to use C16 style plugs, and each one of those plugs are going to be 8 amps a piece. This is a little bit more beneficial in a traditional PDU setup because essentially those banks are going to be very limited. The problem with PDUs and ASIC mining in general is that the bank limits are lower, or so low at that point that you're kind of basically wasting a lot of ports on the PDU. And in the case of the coin miner, it gets even trickier. The reason being is because we have a C19 plug that requires 16 amps of 240 going to it. And if you're not aware, essentially that means that you would have to upgrade to a pretty large PDU that would plug into like a 50 amp circuit and cost an arm and a leg at that point, somewhere between $700 to $1,000, and you're wasting a ton of banks as soon as you plug in one of these miners. An alternative that we ended up going with was from ASIC mining panels, where you can get a 50 amp PDU that has the C19 plugs, 4 of them already coming off of them. Be careful here, because as it could pull up to 16 amps, that would go over if you utilized all 4 of those plugs, potentially if you're not testing out the power from the wall. So max on these, right, would be around 3 rigs, 3 of the C16 Pros on one of these single 50 amp PDUs from ASIC miningpanels.com. Another note about the ASIC miningpanels.com is there have been reports of a faulty wiring within the unit. So if you do order one, make sure you take it apart and check all the connections and that everything is good. I learned this from my neighbors who are ASIC farmers, and I basically wanted to make sure that everything was good. So we went through that process. It's just kind of a note here of your different power options in regard to this. Under no circumstances are you going to run this on a 120 volt, so don't even think about it. It's kind of out of the question, right? I'm not going to recommend it, and you shouldn't try to do it. Probably won't even work. So there's kind of the power, there's the cooling, and so on. How is it performing while it's up and running outside of that? And luckily, I'll pull this up for you guys. We have very good numbers. As you could see in the screenshot from the overview of the miner, it's sitting right at 97, the top end of 97, like 97.8 terahash a second on average. How does that translate into the pool though? And that's going to be important. The pool that we're currently running on in particular is going to be poolin.com. And I really like Poolin for my Dogecoin ASICs. So that's kind of what we've been messing with and why I utilize it. If you take a look here on the panel, we have it pulled up and our real time is showing 95 terahash a second. And our 24 average has been 95 terahash a second as well. In some cases up to 96 terahash a second. So is this miner actually performing at the hash rate that is advertised? Well, if we look within the miner and the report, it definitely looks like it is. And if you compare this to any other miner as it reports on Poolin, it's pretty close, right? We're getting 95 terahash a second as our 24-hour average, and you may expect to see a little bit of a drop off from that 98 terahash or whatever is advertised once it starts hitting the pool, and you're accounting for quality of connection and all of the other alternative like factors that could be playing a part here. So that ends up being pretty good. Let's go ahead and take a look at the mining profitability for this today. And I will get that up right now. So assuming the advertised wattage is correct and it's pulling all of the power, that would be 3,400 watts at 95 terahash a second. If we calculate that out, what you can see here is we are looking at on the SHA 256 for mining rig rentals, $21.68 a day. If you're doing merge mining with Bitcoin and SYS, you're looking at $19.53 a day. Bitcoin plus Ella merge mining is $19.53 a day. You also have straight Bitcoin at $19.53 a day, meaning merge mining is really not going to make much of a difference for you. And this is revenue, of course. You have your power costs here as well. And then poolin.btc, we're about 10 cents below at $19.43 a day. Now, after power, what you're looking at, right, is going to be most profit of $13.52 a day. And then, of course, the $11.37 a day for the rest of these. So if you were looking at, and that is at 10 cents a kilowatt hour, once again, if you're getting into ASIC mining, you should be looking to reduce that power cost. In my case, it's 5.5 cents a kilowatt hour, and your mileage may vary. If we're looking at that standard average cost of 10 cents a kilowatt hour, and we're making the $11.37 a day, if we purchased for $8,200 off of bt-miners.com right now, the ROI would be 721 days. So you are looking, over a year there, almost a couple years really, actually at this point, a little under 2 years for your ROI on this, provided Bitcoin remains at the same price and all of that. And that's kind of where the Bitcoin mining gets a little bit interesting. Right now, because of the cost of all of these ASIC miners, especially as it pertains to Bitcoin, unless you're purchasing in bulk, the ROI can be quite long. And that's why on this channel, we focus on GPU mining, because we want to get you in that process, that mindset that I have, which is basically trying to generate revenue at the lowest investment possible and then move that on up. Obviously, moving into real estate is the big boys game, and that takes a long time for lower to middle class to really get to. And mining really offers you a great way to start generating revenue. Why do I feel safer at a 2-year ROI for a Bitcoin miner than I do for a 2-year ROI on something like a Cadena miner or something along those lines? And that's because Bitcoin is a proof of work coin where the governance is managed by the miners. So I can be fairly certain at this point that the miners are not going to vote themselves out of a business. So not only will SHA-256 more than likely stay around for the longevity of Bitcoin, but we will probably see the full mining emissions go through for 140 years or whatever it is at this point, till the year 2140. And I should be able to pay it off and still be making some sort in return. There is the argument, of course, finally here that, more powerful ASICs are coming onto the market. There was that threat of the Intel BMZ2, which is more efficient at this point, but not so efficient that it is pushing miners like this out of the market. And even then, if you get your power costs low enough, a majority of the network is still running on the Bitmain S9s, while your revenue on those Bitmain S9s are $1 to $2 a day at very low power costs. It's still relevant to have them mining. So as those get faded all the way out and these become the low end miners, you're still looking good 5 to 10 years from now in theory. I would expect, however, some great advances to come out of Bitcoin mining, specifically for this algorithm and ASICs, with big players like Intel hopping in. So maybe if you feel like you want to wait around and see where that's headed, feel free to do so. But if you're looking to purchase one today, please consider using the affiliate link at bt-miners.com to help support the channel. If we get custom firmware, you can be sure we'll be talking about it on this channel. The big thing about that, of course, is even if there is some sort of custom firmware that allows overclocking, these coin miners have a year-long warranty, which is actually pretty good in the ASIC miner. That's very long for an ASIC miner. And having a year-long warranty is definitely appreciated. You would hope that maybe that year-long warranty would come closer to your return on investment time, because that's how the game is played. But if I have any sort of RMA issues or so on, I'll let you guys know. Another note about that from the perspective of BT-miners, when I had some issues, they were very responsive and even offered to have me ship the miner back to their facility here stateside so that they could service it and send it back if I needed that done, which is really pretty incredible if you consider, how that's never really been a thing before at this level. You usually had to find somebody else to refurbish them for you, not the company that you purchased them through. Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit the like, comment, subscribe down below. Hit the notification bell for more videos, and I will see you next Tuesday. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit the subscribe button for more, or check out this playlist for more crypto content related topics.